He is not dying. He is waiting. And the only one who seems to understand that is the dog who refuses to blink beside his bed. The ICU hums softly with controlled precision, monitors glowing in steady green rhythms that suggest stability to everyone except the one creature who will not be convinced. A German shepherd standing rigid at the foot of the bed, chest rising slowly, eyes locked on the man lying still beneath the white hospital sheets. Senior Sergeant Ethan Cole has not moved for hours. His breathing shallow but consistent, his skin pale under the sterile lights, and around him 20 doctors have already come and gone, each one leaving behind the same quiet verdict spoken in professional tones that carry no emotion, no hesitation, no room for doubt. They say his body is shutting down. They say the signs are clear. They say there is nothing more to be done. But Rex does not leave. The dog stands there, unmoving except for the subtle tension in his muscles, ears angled forward, nose lifting slightly every few seconds as if catching something in the air that no machine can measure. A nurse passes by and pauses, watching the dog with a kind of uncertainty that she cannot quite explain, because this is not the behavior of a confused animal, not the restless pacing of a distressed companion. This is something else entirely, something deliberate. Rex steps closer to the bed, lowering his head slowly until his nose hovers just above Ethan's side, not touching, just sensing. And then he exhales, long and quiet, as if confirming something only he understands. Across the room, a doctor glances at the chart again, then at the monitors, then back at the still form on the bed, repeating the same pattern that has brought him to the same conclusion all night. There is no visible trauma, no clear cause, no explanation that fits within the boundaries of what they can measure, and yet the outcome feels inevitable to them. A slow fade they have already accepted. Rex lifts his head again, eyes narrowing slightly, not in aggression, not in fear, but in focus, and he shifts his weight, placing one paw carefully against the edge of the bed, as if grounding himself, as if anchoring his presence to the man who once stood beside him in places where instinct mattered more than certainty. The fluorescent lights hum overhead, casting a cold, even glow across the room, and for a moment everything feels suspended, as if time itself has slowed to match the rhythm of the monitor, steady, controlled, but fragile in a way no one wants to admit. Ethan's right arm lies partially exposed, the sleeve of his hospital gown pushed back just enough to reveal the faint outline of ink along his forearm, the shape of a German shepherd etched into skin that has seen more than most, and Rex's gaze drifts to it for a fraction of a second, holding there, recognizing something that goes beyond scent or sound, something that connects the present moment to a past built on trust. The dog lets out a low breath, not a growl, not a whine, just a sound that sits somewhere between instinct and intention, and he lowers his head again, this time closer, hovering over a single point, along Ethan's side, returning to it again and again as if marking it, as if insisting that this is where the truth lies. A second nurse approaches, slower this time, watching more carefully, and she follows the line of Rex's attention, her eyes tracing the exact spot the dog refuses to ignore, and something about it unsettles her, not because she sees anything obvious, but because she does not. He keeps going back to the same place. She murmurs, almost to herself, and the words drift into the space without being answered, because no one in the room is looking at the dog as anything more than a grieving animal. No one except her. Rex does not move when she steps closer, does not react when she reaches out gently. Placing a hand near his shoulder, he simply stays where he is, breath steady, focus unbroken, as if the entire world has narrowed down to that one point, that one detail that no one else can see. Outside the room, the hospital continues its quiet routine, footsteps in the corridor, distant voices, the soft roll of wheels against polished floors. But inside, something else is happening, something quieter, something that does not announce itself with alarms or urgency, but waits. Patient, persistent, like a signal buried beneath noise, waiting for someone to finally listen, and Rex waits with it, unmoving, unwavering, the only one in the room who has not already decided how this ends. No one argues with the numbers, not in a room like this. Not when the machines speak in steady lines and quiet tones that suggest everything is already understood. And yet the silence around Ethan Cole feels heavier than any alarm ever could, because it is the silence of certainty, the kind that settles in when people believe there is nothing left to question. One by one, the doctors step back from the bed, their voices low, their movements efficient, charts updated, decisions recorded, and, though no one says the word out loud, it lingers there in the air, final, unchallenged, as if the outcome has already been accepted before it has fully arrived. Rex does not accept it. The German Shepherd shifts again, not pacing, not restless, but deliberate, stepping closer until his body nearly touches the side of the bed, his nose returning to that same place along Ethan's torso, hovering there, unwavering, as if the answer has been sitting in front of everyone all along. A senior physician glances over, his expression calm, almost detached, the kind that comes from years of experience, and he gestures toward the door, a subtle signal that it is time to clear the room, time to let the process move forward without interruption. And two staff members step closer to Rex, hesitant but firm, their hands reaching out with the intention of guiding him away. Rex does not snap, does not bark, does not resist with force. He simply refuses to move, his paws planted, his body low, his gaze locked in place. And there is something in that stillness that makes the staff pause, something that does not match the situation they think they are controlling. He needs to be removed. One of the doctors says quietly, not unkind, just certain, and the words fall flat against the presence of the dog, who does not even look at him, who does not acknowledge the authority in the room, because his focus is elsewhere, fixed on something deeper than protocol. The nurse who had been watching earlier steps forward again, slower this time, her attention no longer divided, her eyes following the exact pattern Rex has repeated, the same point, the same distance, the same quiet insistence, and she leans slightly closer, not touching Ethan, just observing, letting her own senses try to catch what the dog has already found. There is nothing obvious, no visible mark, no sign that would stand out to a trained eye. And yet the consistency of Rex's behavior unsettles her more than any anomaly could, because it is too precise to be random, too focused to be dismissed. He is trying to tell us something, she says softly, the words barely rising above the hum of the machines, and for a moment, no one responds, because it is not the kind of statement that fits easily into a clinical setting. It does not align with charts or protocols or the quiet authority of experience. The physician exhales slowly, shaking his head just slightly, not dismissive, but firm. We have run every test, he replies, his tone controlled, measured. There is nothing left to find. And in that moment, the difference between seeing and believing becomes clear, because Rex continues to see. Even when everyone else has stopped looking, the dog lowers his head further, his nose almost brushing against the fabric of the hospital gown, and he inhales again, deeper this time, as if drawing in something that exists beyond the reach of machines, something carried in scent, in memory, in instinct, refined through years of working beside the man who now lies silent. His body tenses slightly, not in fear, not in aggression, but in urgency, and he lets out a low sound, barely audible, more breath than voice, and it pulls the nurse's attention back to him instantly. She hesitates, then steps closer, ignoring the subtle shift in the room as others begin to move away, as decisions are quietly reinforced. And she follows the line of Rex's focus again, her eyes narrowing as she studies the same point with more intention this time. Not just looking, but searching. Wait, she says, a little louder now, enough to interrupt the quiet flow of the room, and the movement slows, just enough, just for a moment. Because something in her voice carries a different kind of weight, not authority, but conviction. Rex does not move, does not break his focus. And in that shared stillness, something begins to shift, not in the machines, not yet, but in the space between doubt and attention, where a single decision can change the direction of everything. The nurse reaches for the chart, her hands steady despite the tension building around her, and she scans through the results again, not for what is there, but for what might have been overlooked, her mind aligning with the pattern the dog has already established, narrowing the field, focusing the question. Behind her, the physician watches, his expression unreadable, caught between certainty and the quiet disruption unfolding in front of him. and Rex remains exactly where he is, the only one in the room who has not wavered, the only one who has not accepted the ending that everyone else is preparing for. Because somewhere beneath the surface, beneath the silence, beneath the steady lines on the monitor, something is still there, something waiting to be seen, and Rex is not going anywhere until someone finally does. The room does not change all at once. It shifts in something smaller, quieter, like a breath held just a second too long before being released, and the nurse feels it before anyone else does. Not in the machines, not in the monitors, but in the space between them where Rex continues to hold his ground without hesitation. She leans in again, closer now, her focus narrowing to the exact point the dog has marked over and over, her hand hovering just above Ethan's side, not touching yet, just tracing the outline of where something might be hidden beneath what appears normal. Rex watches her movement with absolute stillness, his ears slightly forward, his body low but unwavering, as if this moment is the one he has been waiting for since the beginning. The physician exhales behind her, a quiet sound that carries both patience and resistance, and he glances at the clock, then at the chart, then back at the scene unfolding in front of him, because what he sees does not fit into the pattern he trusts, does not align with the certainty built from years of repetition. "We have already checked everything," he says again, softer now, not as a command, but as a reminder, as if repeating it might restore the structure that is beginning to loosen around them. The nurse does not respond immediately, her attention fixed on something she cannot yet name, her fingers lowering just enough to press lightly against the fabric, testing for a response that may not come, and for a moment, there is nothing, just the steady hum of the machines, the quiet rhythm that has lulled everyone else into acceptance. Rex inhales sharply then, a subtle shift, barely noticeable to anyone who is not watching him closely, and he adjusts his position by only a few centimeters, refining the point, narrowing it even further, and the nurse follows that movement instinctively, her hand moving with him, aligning with the exact place he insists on. "Here," she whispers, almost to herself, and this time, the word carries something different. Not uncertainty, but recognition, the faint spark of possibility that refuses to be ignored. She presses again, more deliberately now, and this time there is a response, not dramatic, not immediate, but subtle, a slight change beneath her fingers, a tension that does not belong to stillness, and her breath catches just enough to betray it. Behind her, the physician steps closer, his posture shifting despite himself, drawn in by the change he did not expect, and he leans in, his trained eye following her lead, focusing on the same point, the same detail that had been invisible until now, that should not be there. He murmurs, the certainty in his voice replaced by something else, something that sounds like reconsideration, and the room seems to tighten around that moment, every movement slowing, every sound becoming sharper. Rex remains completely still, his role unchanged, his gaze fixed, as if he has already done everything he needs to do and now waits for the rest to follow. The nurse reaches for the chart again, flipping through the results with renewed urgency, not frantic, but precise, cross-referencing, aligning what she feels with what has been recorded, and something begins to emerge, not a clear answer yet, but a gap, a small inconsistency that had been overlooked because it did not fit the expected pattern. "We need another scan," she says, louder now, her voice carrying across the room, and this time, it does not fade into silence, it holds, it lands, it demands to be considered. The physician hesitates, just for a fraction of a second, the weight of experience pulling one way, the evidence unfolding in front of him pulling another, and then he nods, a small, decisive movement that shifts everything. "Do it," he says, and the word breaks the stillness, not violently, but clearly, like a line being redrawn. The room moves again, but differently now, not toward closure, but toward reconsideration, equipment repositioned, monitors adjusted, hands moving with purpose that feels sharper, more focused, and through it all, Rex does not move, not even when people pass around him, not even when the energy of the room changes completely, because his work is not in the action, it is in the certainty he has already provided. As the preparations begin, the nurse glances down at him for a brief moment, her expression softened by something that looks almost like gratitude, though she does not say it aloud, because she does not need to. Not here, not now. Ethan remains still on the bed, his breathing unchanged, his body quiet. But the room around him has shifted in a way that suggests the ending is no longer certain, that something has been found where nothing was expected, and Rex lowers his head slightly, not in exhaustion, not yet, but in quiet confirmation, as if the signal he carried has finally been heard, and the world, at last, is beginning to listen. The room no longer belongs to certainty. It belongs to motion, quiet but unmistakable, as the equipment is repositioned and the second scan is prepared with a precision that feels sharper than before, not rushed, not chaotic, but focused in a way that had been missing only minutes earlier. The nurse steps back just enough to allow space, her eyes still anchored to the exact point Rex had marked, as if letting go of it, even for a second, might cause it to disappear again, and the physician moves beside her, no longer distant, no longer detached, his attention now aligned with hers, with the dog, with the possibility that something had been missed not because it was invisible, but because no one had been looking in the right place. Rex remains where he is, his body low against the floor, his breathing steady but heavier now. The tension that had held him upright beginning to ease as the room finally responds to what he has been trying to show, and his eyes follow every movement. Not with urgency anymore, but with quiet insistence, as if ensuring that this time, no one looks away too soon. The scanning device hums softly as it is brought into position, its light casting a pale glow across Ethan's side, illuminating the area with a clarity that feels almost surgical, and for a moment, nothing appears different, nothing that would justify the shift that has taken over the room. And the physician's jaw tightens slightly, the old certainty pressing back against the new doubt. "Hold it steady," he says, his voice low but controlled, and the nurse adjusts the angle just a fraction, aligning it precisely where Rex had insisted. And this time, the image responds, not dramatically, not with a sudden revelation, but with a subtle distortion, a faint irregularity that should not be there, something small enough to be overlooked, but clear enough now that it cannot be ignored. The screen flickers slightly as the detail sharpens, the shape becoming more defined, and the physician leans closer, his breath slowing as he studies it, his mind recalibrating, shifting away from what he thought he knew toward what is now undeniable. That was not in the previous scans. He murmurs, more to himself than anyone else, and the nurse nods, her focus unbroken, because she knows exactly why it had not been seen. It had never been looked for here, not like this, not with this level of attention. Behind them, another doctor steps closer, drawn in by the change in tone, by the subtle shift in posture that signals something important has been found, and within seconds, the quiet acceptance that had filled the room is replaced by a different kind of silence, one that carries anticipation instead of finality. Rex lifts his head slightly, just enough to see the screen, not understanding the image, but recognizing the reaction, the way the humans respond when something finally aligns with what he has known all along. And he exhales slowly, a long, quiet breath that seems to release the last of the tension he has been holding since he first stepped into the room. The physician straightens, his expression no longer detached, no longer certain in the way it had been before, but focused, sharp, and he turns to the others with a clarity that cuts through the lingering doubt. "We are not done here," he says, and the words shift the entire room, not loudly, not dramatically, but completely, because they replace an ending with a question, and that question demands action. The team moves again, this time with a different energy, equipment adjusted, parameters recalibrated, voices low but purposeful, and through it all, Ethan remains still, his body unchanged, his breathing steady. But the meaning of that stillness has altered. It is no longer a sign of decline, but a space where something can still be reached. The nurse glances down at Rex for a brief moment, her expression soft but certain, and though she does not speak, the acknowledgement is clear, the shift in direction, the second look, the refusal to stop, all of it began with him. The physician studies the screen again, then the patient, then the exact point where everything has converged. And he nods once, the decision forming without hesitation now, because once something is seen, It cannot be unseen. Prepare for intervention, he says, his voice steady, grounded, and the words move through the room like a current, changing everything they touch. Rex lowers his head back to the floor, his eyes still open, still aware, but softer now. The urgency replaced by something quieter, something that feels like completion. Not because the outcome is certain, but because the path has finally been corrected. Outside the room, the hospital continues as it always does. Footsteps, distant voices, the steady rhythm of a place that never truly sleeps. But inside, something has shifted that cannot be measured by machines alone. Something that began not with data, not with analysis, but with instinct, with loyalty, with a refusal to accept what did not feel right. And as the team prepares to act, as the next step begins to unfold, one truth settles quietly into the space between them all, that sometimes the difference between losing and saving a life is not found in what is known, but in who is willing to keep looking when everyone else has already stopped. The decision does not echo, it settles, firm and quiet, as the room shifts fully from acceptance to action, and the machines that once marked an ending now begin to guide something else entirely. Something that feels like a second chance measured not in certainty, but in timing. The team moves with precision, not rushed, not chaotic, but sharpened by the awareness that what was almost missed now demands everything they have. Hands steady as they adjust settings, recalibrate parameters, and prepare for the intervention that only moments ago had not even been considered. The physician stands at the center of it, no longer distant, no longer observing from the edge, but fully present, his focus narrowed to the same point that Rex had marked from the beginning. The place where something small and hidden has now become the difference between stopping and continuing. The nurse remains close, her movements aligned with his. Her earlier hesitation replaced by a clarity that comes from trusting what she chose to follow. And she glances briefly toward Rex, just once, as if grounding herself in the reason this is happening at all. Rex lies where he has been, his body still, his breathing steady but slow, his eyes open just enough to follow the movement in the room. And though he does not understand the instruments or the decisions being made, he understands the shift, the energy, the way the humans are now listening instead of concluding. Ethan remains unchanged to the eye, his body still resting beneath the pale sheets, his breathing guided by the quiet rhythm of the machines. But the meaning of that stillness has altered. It is no longer the silence of something ending. It is the space where something can still be reached if the moment is not lost. The physician nods once, a signal more than a gesture, and the process begins, careful, controlled, every movement deliberate, each second carrying weight but not panic, because panic belongs to uncertainty. And this is something else now, something focused, something precise. The monitors respond first, not dramatically, not with alarms or sudden spikes, but with subtle changes. Slight variations in rhythm that would have gone unnoticed before, but now draw every eye in the room. Each line on the screen becoming a language they are all reading together. The nurse watches closely, her breath held just enough to feel the shift, and when it comes, it is almost too small to name, a slight adjustment, a response that suggests something has been reached, something has been touched where before there was only silence. There, she says quietly, and the word carries through the room without needing to be repeated. Because everyone sees it, everyone feels it. The difference between before and now measured in fractions but undeniable. The physician leans in further, his movements more assured now, guided by the feedback that is beginning to emerge, and he adjusts again, refining, aligning, following the path that has opened in front of him. And with each adjustment, the monitors respond, not perfectly, not fully, but enough. Enough to confirm that they are no longer searching in the dark. Rex lifts his head slightly, just enough to see the screen, his eyes reflecting the shifting light. And though he does not understand the images, he recognizes the change in the room, the way the tension has transformed into something steadier, something that no longer pushes him forward but allows him to remain where he is. The nurse exhales slowly, her shoulders lowering just slightly as the pattern stabilizes, not complete, not resolved, but moving, and she glances down at Ethan's arm, at the faint outline of the German shepherd tattoo resting against his skin, and for a moment, The connection feels almost too precise to be coincidence, as if the past has reached into the present to guide it forward. The physician steps back half a pace, his eyes still on the monitors, his expression no longer guarded but focused, and he nods again, this time to himself, acknowledging what has just happened, what has been found, what almost was not. Keep going, he says, his voice steady, and the team continues, the process unfolding with a rhythm that now feels guided rather than uncertain, each movement building on the last, each second adding to something that is no longer slipping away. Outside the room, the hospital remains unchanged, the quiet flow of routine continuing as it always does. But inside, something has shifted that cannot be measured by routine alone, something that began with a refusal to accept what could not be explained and has now become a path forward that did not exist before. Rex lowers his head again, his body finally easing into the floor, not because he is done, but because he no longer needs to hold the room in place. His part in the story carried through to the point where others have taken it from him, and he rests there, quiet, steady, his presence still anchoring the space even as the work continues. The monitors hold their new rhythm, not perfect, not final, but alive in a way they had not been before. And as the team continues to move, to adjust, to follow the line that has been revealed, one truth settles quietly into the room, not spoken, not written, but understood by all who stand within it. That the moment they almost missed has become the moment that changes everything, and it began with a dog who refused to look away when everyone else already had. The change does not arrive as a miracle. It arrives as persistence, slow and deliberate, like something being pulled back from a distance no one could measure, and the room settles into a rhythm that feels different now, no longer waiting, no longer preparing for an end, but holding steady in the fragile space where continuation becomes possible. The monitors maintain their altered pattern, subtle but consistent, each line carrying a quiet confirmation that what they have reached is not fading. And the physician stands still for a moment, not moving forward, not stepping back, simply watching, allowing the data to speak before he does. The nurse remains beside him, her attention unwavering, her earlier doubt replaced entirely by a focus that feels grounded. And though her hands continue their work, there is a calm in her movements now that had not been there before, a confidence not in outcome, but in direction. Rex lies at the edge of the room, his body finally at rest, his breathing deepening as the tension releases from muscles that had held themselves rigid for far too long, and his eyes, though heavy, remain open, tracking the subtle shifts in the space around him, not searching anymore, but confirming, as if making sure the path he marked continues without interruption. Ethan's body remains still, unchanged in posture, but the stillness no longer carries the same meaning. It no longer suggests distance or departure. It holds something else now, something suspended, something reachable, and as the minutes pass, that difference becomes more defined, more certain. The physician steps closer again, his gaze moving from the monitors to the patient, then back, aligning what he sees with what he feels, and he reaches out, placing his hand lightly against Ethan's side where the anomaly had been found, not probing, not testing, just confirming its presence, its position, its reality, and he nods once, the decision fully formed now. We stabilize and monitor, he says, his voice steady, no longer weighed down by doubt, and the words move through the team with quiet authority, shifting the room into its next phase, not urgency, not alarm, but careful continuation. The nurse adjusts the settings again, refining the support, ensuring that each parameter aligns with the new understanding, and she glances briefly toward Rex, her expression softening in a way that is almost imperceptible, but real, because without him, none of this would be happening. Rex's ears twitch slightly at the sound of movement, but he does not rise. He remains where he is, his body choosing rest now that his purpose has been fulfilled, his presence still anchoring the space without effort. The physician steps back half a pace, allowing the system to hold its course, and for the first time since the night began, there is no immediate next action required, no decision pressing down on the moment, only observation, patience, and the quiet acknowledgement that they are no longer losing ground. Outside the room, The corridor carries on with its steady rhythm, footsteps passing, voices low, the distant hum of a place that never stops. But inside, time feels different, measured not in urgency, but in breath, in the slow, steady confirmation that something has shifted. The nurse watches the monitor closely, her eyes tracing each line, each fluctuation, and when it holds, when it continues without slipping back, she exhales softly, the breath leaving her as something close to relief, though she does not name it, because it is too early for that, too fragile, and yet undeniable. Rex lowers his head fully now, resting it against the floor, his eyes finally closing for a brief moment, not from weakness alone, but from release. The kind that comes when a task carried through instinct and loyalty reaches its natural end. The physician glances once more at the patient, then at the team, and there is something in his expression that has changed, something quieter, less certain in the way it once was, but stronger in another way, shaped by what he has just witnessed, by what he almost missed. "Keep him steady," he says, and the words are simple, but they carry a different weight now, not the instruction of someone closing a case, but of someone continuing it. Ethan's chest rises and falls with a rhythm that now feels connected, no longer distant. And though he does not move, though his eyes remain closed, there is something in the stillness that suggests presence rather than absence, a subtle difference that changes everything. The room holds that difference carefully, no one rushing it, no one breaking it with unnecessary movement or sound, because they understand now how easily it could have been lost, how close they came to letting it slip away unnoticed. Rex breathes slowly, deeply, his body finally still in a way that reflects not tension but trust. And in that quiet trust, the entire room finds its balance, not because the outcome is guaranteed, but because the path forward has been found. And as the minutes continue to pass, as the monitors hold their line, as the team maintains their steady focus, one truth settles gently into the space around them, not spoken, not written, but understood in the quietest way possible, that sometimes survival does not begin with certainty or knowledge, but with the simple, unwavering refusal to let go of something that cannot yet be explained. Time does not move forward in the usual way inside the ICU. It stretches, it folds, it lingers in the quiet space between breaths, and for the first time since the night began, that space no longer feels empty. It feels occupied, as though something has returned and is choosing to stay. The monitors continue their steady rhythm, not perfect, not strong, but consistent enough to hold attention without alarm. And the team around Ethan Cole adjusts to this new pace, no longer preparing for loss, but learning how to sustain what has been regained. The nurse remains closest, her presence steady, her eyes moving between the screen and the man on the bed, reading both with equal care, and every few seconds, she glances toward the same point Rex had marked, not out of doubt, but out of respect for what had been revealed there. The physician stands slightly back now, his posture changed, less rigid, more observant, as if allowing the situation to speak for itself before stepping in again. And there is something quieter in his expression, something shaped not by certainty, but by reconsideration. Rex remains on the floor, his body resting fully now, the tension gone from his limbs, but his awareness has not faded. His ears still respond to subtle changes. His breathing aligns with the rhythm of the room, and every so often, his eyes open just enough to check, to confirm that the path he forced into existence is still being followed. Ethan's hand lies still at his side, the faint outline of the tattoo partially visible beneath the soft light. And as the minutes pass, something shifts there, not a movement anyone would notice at first, just a slight change in tone, a subtle response that does not belong to stillness alone. The nurse notices it before the machines do, her gaze catching the smallest variation, and she leans in slightly, her breath held as she watches, not touching, not interrupting, just observing. The monitors reflect it seconds later, a minor adjustment, a gentle fluctuation that aligns with what she has seen, and she looks up at the physician, not with alarm, but with quiet confirmation, and he nods once, understanding immediately, because now they are no longer searching for signs. They are following them. Rex's eyes open fully at that moment, as if he has felt the change rather than seen it, and he lifts his head slightly, not rising, just enough to watch more closely. his gaze moving from Ethan to the monitors and back again, connecting the two in a way that feels instinctive rather than learned. The room holds that moment carefully, no one rushing forward, no one breaking the fragile continuity that has formed, because they understand now how easily it could have been lost. The nurse adjusts her position, her movements gentle, and she speaks. Softly, not to the team, not to the physician, but to the man on the bed, her voice low and steady, as if reminding him of something just beyond reach, something worth returning to. The words do not need to be heard to have meaning. They settle into the space like a quiet invitation, and for a moment, nothing changes, and then something does. Ethan's fingers shift, barely. A small movement that could be dismissed if not for the context that now surrounds it, and the nurse's breath catches, not in shock, but in recognition, because this is no longer absence. This is response. The physician steps closer again, his attention sharpened, his eyes moving quickly between the monitors and the subtle motion he has just witnessed, and he does not speak immediately. He lets the moment confirm itself, and when it does, he nods once, the decision forming without hesitation. He is responding, he says quietly, and the words carry through the room like a steady current. Not loud, not dramatic, but undeniable. Rex exhales slowly, a long breath that seems to release something deep within him, and he lowers his head again, not in exhaustion, but in relief, the kind that does not need to be expressed. Only felt. The nurse's hand hovers near Ethan's arm, not touching, just close enough to feel the warmth, the presence that is no longer fading, and she allows herself a small breath, a moment of stillness within the motion, because this is the shift, the point where everything that followed Rex's insistence becomes real. Outside the room, the hospital continues its quiet rhythm, unaware of the exact moment when a life turns back toward itself, but inside, everyone feels it, not as a sudden change, but as a steady return, a rejoining of something that had drifted too far. The physician steps back again, his expression calm but changed, and he looks at the team, then at Rex, and though he does not speak it aloud, the acknowledgement is there, clear and unspoken, that the difference between what they almost accepted and what is now happening lies not in what they knew, but in what they were willing to reconsider. Rex remains still, his body at rest, his role complete, but his presence continues to anchor the room in a way no machine can replicate, and as the minutes pass, as the signs hold, as the response strengthens just enough to be certain, one quiet truth settles into the space between them all, that sometimes the moment that saves a life does not arrive with noise or urgency, but with patience, with attention, and with the unwavering presence of one who refuses to leave when everyone else already has. The room breathes differently now, not in silence, not in surrender, but in a rhythm that feels cautiously alive. And as the minutes stretch forward, the small movement in Ethan Cole's hand becomes more than an isolated response. It becomes a pattern, faint but consistent, like a signal slowly rising through noise. The nurse watches it with steady focus, her eyes trained not just on the monitors but on the man himself, because now she understands that the machines are only part of the story, that the truth of what is happening exists in both places at once, and she adjusts her stance slightly, aligning herself closer, ready to respond to whatever comes next without disrupting what is already unfolding. The physician stands just behind her, his earlier certainty now replaced with a measured attentiveness, and he studies the monitors again, not looking for confirmation of an ending, but for continuity, for proof that what has begun is not fading. And when the rhythm holds, when the subtle variations remain stable, he nods once, a quiet acknowledgement that they have crossed into something new. Rex lifts his head again, more fully this time, his ears turning forward as if catching a change in the air itself, and he watches Ethan with an intensity that is no longer urgent, but deeply focused, as though he is following something invisible that is slowly returning. Ethan's chest rises slightly deeper now, not dramatically, but enough to shift the rhythm of his breathing, and the nurse notices it immediately, her hand hovering just above his arm, not touching, just present, and she leans in slightly, her voice soft as she speaks again, not to wake him, not to call him back forcefully, but to guide him gently toward the surface. The words are simple, grounded, carrying no pressure, only presence. and they settle into the space between them like something familiar, something that does not demand a response but invites one. The monitors reflect the change seconds later, the pattern adjusting, aligning with the deeper breath, and the physician steps closer again, his eyes narrowing slightly as he reads the shift, not with doubt, but with recognition. Because now it is no longer a question of whether something is happening, but how far it will go. Rex shifts his weight, pushing himself up just enough to sit, his body still heavy with fatigue, but his attention fully engaged, and he watches Ethan's face closely, his gaze fixed on the smallest details, the slight movement beneath closed eyelids, the subtle tension in the jaw, the faint change in expression that signals something deeper than reflex. The nurse glances at Rex briefly, and for a moment, there is a shared understanding between them, not spoken, not acknowledged aloud, but present, the recognition that they are both watching for the same thing, both waiting for the same sign. Ethan's fingers move again, this time more clearly, a slow curling motion that does not belong to stillness, and the nurse inhales softly, her composure holding, but her focus sharpening even further, and she places her hand gently over his, not pressing, not guiding, just there, allowing contact, allowing the connection to exist without forcing it. The physician observes closely, his posture steady, and he glances at the monitors once more, confirming that the internal patterns match what they are seeing externally, that the body and the signals are aligning, and he speaks quietly, his voice calm but certain. Continue to monitor. He is coming back. And the words settle into the room with a weight that is entirely different from what was spoken earlier. Rex exhales slowly, his shoulders lowering slightly as the tension releases further, and he leans forward just a little, not approaching the bed fully, but closing the distance enough to remain connected, his presence steady, his role no longer to push, but to remain. Ethan's breathing deepens again, another small shift, another step, and though his eyes remain closed, there is something in his expression now that suggests awareness, a faint trace of something returning, something that had been just beyond reach. The nurse keeps her hand where it is, her thumb resting lightly against his fingers, and she speaks again, softer now, as if the volume itself matters, as if the quiet is part of what allows him to find his way back. The room holds that quiet carefully, no one breaking it, no unnecessary movement, no interruption, because they understand now that this moment is not fragile in the way it once was, but it is still forming, still building, still becoming. The physician steps back slightly, allowing space, trusting the process now that it has proven itself, and he glances once more at Rex, his expression unreadable but changed, because there is no longer any doubt that the dog's presence altered the course of what happened here. Rex remains seated, his gaze steady, his breathing even, and for the first time since the night began, his eyes soften, not in exhaustion alone, but in something that feels like quiet certainty, as if the path he held onto has finally reached its destination. The monitors continue their steady rhythm, stronger now, clearer, and as the minutes pass, the room settles fully into this new state, not waiting, not fearing, but witnessing, as something that had nearly been lost finds its way back, step by quiet step, guided not by noise or urgency, but by patience, by attention, and by the unwavering presence of one who refused to let the story end before it truly had. The moment does not arrive with a sudden change. It unfolds quietly, almost cautiously, as if even time itself is careful not to move too quickly and risk undoing what has just begun. And inside the ICU, every breath now carries weight, not because it might be the last, but because it proves there is more to come. Ethan Cole's fingers remain gently curled beneath the nurse's hand, no longer still, no longer distant. And though the movement is small, it holds a meaning that shifts the entire room, a signal that something within him is no longer drifting but returning. The nurse keeps her voice low, steady, speaking not to fill silence but to guide through it, her words simple, grounded, as if she is speaking to someone just beyond hearing, someone who might recognize the tone before the meaning. The physician watches closely, his attention divided between the monitors and the man on the bed, but no longer in doubt, no longer searching for confirmation, only following what is already unfolding, and each new reading aligns with what they are seeing, subtle changes strengthening, patterns stabilizing, the quiet progression of a body reconnecting with itself. Rex shifts slightly, pushing himself up from where he had been resting, his legs unsteady for a moment before settling beneath him, and he moves closer, not quickly, not urgently, but with a calm certainty. Each step measured as if he knows exactly how close he needs to be. He stops beside the bed, lowering his head just enough to bring himself level with Ethan's arm, his nose hovering near the same place he had marked before. But this time there is no insistence, no urgency, only presence, as if confirming that what he sensed is no longer hidden. The room remains quiet around them, the staff moving only when necessary. Their voices kept low, their actions deliberate, because something in the air demands that kind of respect, the kind that does not come from instruction but from understanding. Ethan's breathing deepens again, another small shift, but this time it is more visible, more certain, and the nurse feels it beneath her hand, the rhythm strengthening, aligning with the monitors in a way that leaves no room for doubt. She glances up briefly, meeting the physician's eyes, and there is no need for words. Between them, the confirmation is already shared, already understood. Rex tilts his head slightly, his ears forward, his gaze fixed on Ethan's face, and for a moment, everything else fades. The machines, the staff, the room itself, leaving only the quiet connection between them, one waiting, one returning. Ethan's eyelids flicker, barely, a movement so small it could be missed if not for the focus now centered entirely on him. And the nurse inhales softly, her hand tightening just slightly, around his, not holding, just present, and she leans closer, her voice lowering even further, as if the space between them has become something delicate that must be handled with care. "You are here," she murmurs, not asking, not commanding, simply stating what is becoming true, and the words settle into the moment like a marker, a point of return. Rex exhales slowly, a soft sound that carries more than breath, and he shifts closer still, resting his head gently against the edge of the bed, his presence steady, unwavering, no longer pushing forward but holding the space that has been created. Ethan's fingers move again, this time more clearly, a slight tightening, a response that travels through the nurse's hand and into the room, and the physician steps forward instinctively, his attention sharpening, his posture leaning into the moment without breaking it. The monitors respond in kind, their lines adjusting, not dramatically, but with a clarity that leaves no uncertainty, and the rhythm becomes stronger, more defined, each beat reinforcing the last. The nurse smiles faintly, not outwardly, not fully, but enough to soften her expression, enough to reflect the shift that has taken place. And she keeps her hand where it is, maintaining that connection, allowing it to guide what comes next. Rex remains still, his eyes never leaving Ethan, and for the first time since the night began, there is something in his posture that resembles ease, not complete, not careless, but present, as if the burden he carried has finally reached its end. Ethan's eyelids flutter again, longer this time, the movement no longer fleeting, and though they do not fully open, the change is unmistakable, the boundary between stillness and awareness beginning to dissolve. The physician exhales quietly, a sound that carries both relief and recognition, and he steps back half a pace, allowing the moment to continue without interruption, because now it is not something to be forced, it is something to be allowed. The room holds that allowance carefully, no one rushing forward, no one speaking louder than necessary, because they understand now that this is not a moment to control, but one to witness. Rex lowers his head slightly, his eyes softening as he watches, and in that quiet stillness, something settles into place, something that had been uncertain now becoming real, not through force or urgency, but through patience, through presence, and through the unwavering refusal of one loyal soul to accept an ending that was never meant to be final. The shift becomes undeniable not through noise but through clarity, the kind that settles slowly into every corner of the room until no one can pretend it is not there. And as Ethan Cole's breathing deepens again, steady and more connected than before, the space around him transforms from observation into quiet anticipation. The nurse remains close, her hand still resting gently over his, not guiding, not urging, simply present, and she watches the subtle changes with a focus that feels almost protective, as if guarding the fragile bridge between where he was and where he is returning. The physician stands just behind her, his attention fully engaged now, no longer divided, no longer resisting what he sees, and he studies the monitors with a calm intensity, tracking each fluctuation, each alignment, until the pattern becomes something solid enough to trust. Rex remains at the bedside, his head resting near Ethan's arm, his breathing slow and even, his body finally at ease. But his awareness has not faded, his eyes following the smallest movements with a quiet certainty that does not demand attention but holds it nonetheless. Ethan's eyelids flicker again, longer this time, the movement lingering just enough to suggest something more than reflex. And the nurse leans in slightly, her voice soft, steady, grounding, as if offering a path back without forcing it. "You are safe," she murmurs, the words simple, unburdened, and they settle into the moment like something familiar, something that belongs. The monitors respond in rhythm, not dramatically, but with a strengthening consistency, each line holding steady where before it wavered, and the physician exhales quietly, a breath that carries recognition rather than relief. Because this is no longer a question of if, but of how far. Rex shifts slightly, lifting his head just enough to watch Ethan's face more closely, his ears forward, his gaze unwavering, and for a moment, everything else fades again, leaving only the quiet exchange between them, one returning, one waiting. Ethan's fingers tighten slightly beneath the nurse's hand, a small but deliberate movement, and this time it holds. It does not fade back into stillness, and the nurse feels it, her expression softening, her focus sharpening, and she keeps her hand where it is, allowing that connection to remain uninterrupted. The physician steps closer, his posture aligned with the moment, and he studies Ethan's face, the slight changes in muscle, the faint tension that now suggests awareness, and he nods once, a quiet confirmation that the line has been crossed, that what was almost lost is now returning. "Stay with us," he says softly, not as an instruction, but as an acknowledgement. And the words carry a weight that feels different now, no longer spoken into silence, but into something that can respond. Rex exhales slowly, a long, steady breath, and he lowers his head again, resting it gently against the edge of the bed, his presence calm, unwavering, no longer pushing forward, only holding space. Ethan's eyelids lift slightly, not fully open, not yet, but enough to reveal a flicker of awareness beneath them. And the nurse inhales softly, her voice lowering further, guiding without pressure, allowing the moment to unfold at its own pace. The room remains still around them, no sudden movement, no raised voices, only the quiet continuation of what has begun. Because they understand now that this is not a moment to control, but one to witness, the monitors maintain their steady rhythm, stronger now, more certain, and the physician steps back half a pace, allowing the process to continue without interference, his expression calm but changed, shaped by the realization that what almost ended here has found its way back through something they did not see. Rex's eyes soften further, his body fully at rest now, and for the first time since the night began, there is no tension left in him, only presence, quiet and complete, as if the task he carried has reached its natural end. Ethan's breathing continues, steady, grounded, and though his eyes remain only partially open, the difference is unmistakable. The distance has closed, the silence has shifted, and the room holds that change carefully, allowing it to settle, to become real. Outside, the hospital continues its quiet rhythm, unaware of the exact moment when everything turned, but inside, those who stand within this space understand it fully, not as a sudden miracle, but as the result of something far quieter, far more persistent. And as the minutes pass, as the connection strengthens, as the presence of life becomes undeniable, one truth settles gently into the space between them all, that sometimes the line between losing and saving is not drawn by knowledge alone, but by the willingness to listen to something that cannot be measured, and to trust it long enough for it to lead the way back. The moment settles into something quieter than triumph, something steadier than relief, and inside the ICU the air feels different, no longer heavy with endings, but shaped by continuation, as if the room itself has shifted to accommodate what is returned. Ethan Cole's eyelids tremble again, not briefly this time. Not uncertain, but sustained, and slowly, almost reluctantly, they begin to part, revealing a narrow line of awareness that had been hidden beneath stillness for far too long. And the nurse notices it immediately, her breath catching softly as she leans closer, her voice lowering into something almost instinctive, not instructing, not urging, simply present. "You are all right," she says gently, and the words land in a space that can now receive them. Not fully, not clearly, but enough. The monitors reflect the change in subtle alignment, the rhythm holding steady, the pattern strengthening in a way that no longer requires interpretation, and the physician steps forward, his posture calm but attentive, his earlier certainty replaced entirely by recognition. Because now what is happening is no longer a question of possibility, it is unfolding in front of them. Rex lifts his head fully, his body rising slowly despite the fatigue that weighs on him, and he moves closer to the bed. Careful, deliberate, his paws silent against the floor as he positions himself where he can see Ethan's face clearly, his gaze unwavering, his presence grounded in something deeper than instinct alone. Ethan's eyes open a fraction more, unfocused at first, drifting, searching for something to anchor to, and for a moment, there is confusion in the space between what he feels and what he can understand. But then his gaze settles, drawn not to the lights, not to the movement of the staff, but to the shape beside him, the familiar outline that has never left. Rex exhales softly, a quiet sound that carries recognition, and he lowers his head slightly, bringing himself closer to Ethan's line of sight, not pushing forward, not demanding attention, simply being there. The nurse steps back just enough to allow the moment to form without interference, her hands still steady, her presence still close, but no longer at the center, because something else is happening now, something that belongs to them. Ethan's fingers tighten slightly again, this time with intention, and the nurse feels it, her expression softening further as she watches the connection strengthen, and she glances briefly at the physician, who nods once, his eyes reflecting the same understanding, the same quiet shift from doubt to acceptance. "He is with us," he says, his voice low but certain, and the words do not echo. They settle, grounding the moment in something real. Rex remains still, his eyes locked onto Ethan's, and for a brief second, everything else fades, the machines, the room, the movement around them, leaving only the quiet exchange between two beings who have found their way back to each other. Ethan's breathing deepens again, more natural now, less guided, and his gaze steadies, no longer drifting, no longer searching, and though he does not speak, though his voice has not yet returned, there is something in his expression that says enough, something that acknowledges the presence beside him, the one who refused to leave when everything else pointed toward an ending. The nurse moves gently, adjusting the equipment with care, ensuring that nothing disrupts the fragile balance that has been achieved, and the physician steps back half a pace, allowing space, allowing the moment to exist without control, because now it is no longer something to manage, but something to witness. Rex lowers himself slowly beside the bed, his body finally settling into rest, his head remaining raised just enough to keep Ethan in view, his breathing steady, his posture calm, and for the first time since the night began, there is no urgency left in him, only quiet certainty. The room continues its gentle rhythm, the soft hum of machines, the low movement of staff, but none of it intrudes, none of it breaks the space that has formed, because they all understand now that what has happened here is not defined by the actions taken, but by the moment that made them possible. Ethan's eyes remain open, clearer now, more focused, and though his strength has not yet returned, though his body still rests within the limits of recovery, there is no longer any doubt that he is present, that he has crossed back into the world he almost left behind. The nurse watches him with a quiet steadiness, her earlier tension replaced with something softer, something that reflects not just relief, but respect, because she knows how close this moment came to not existing at all. The physician glances once more at Rex, his expression thoughtful, changed in a way that does not need explanation, and though he does not speak, the acknowledgement is there, clear and lasting, that what brought them here did not come from knowledge alone. Rex closes his eyes briefly, not in exhaustion, but in peace, his body finally at ease, and as the room holds steady around them. As the morning begins to edge into the edges of the hospital beyond, one quiet truth settles into place, not spoken, not written, but understood by all who were there, that sometimes the line between losing and saving is drawn not by what is known, but by who refuses to let go when everyone else already has. The quiet that follows is not empty. It is full in a way that no one in the room had expected, and as the minutes pass, the urgency that once defined every movement fades into something steadier, something that allows space for breath, for presence, for the slow return of what had nearly been lost. Ethan Cole remains on the bed, eyes now open more consistently, still adjusting, still finding his place within the light and sound around him, but no longer drifting, no longer unreachable. And though his voice has not yet formed, though his strength has not yet returned, there is a clarity in his gaze that anchors him firmly in the moment. The nurse continues her quiet work, adjusting the equipment with careful precision, her movements now guided by maintenance rather than urgency. And every so often she glances toward Ethan, not checking for signs, but acknowledging them, reinforcing the quiet understanding that he is here, that he has come back. The physician stands a short distance away, his posture relaxed in a way that it had not been before, his hands no longer held in tension, and he studies the monitors with a calm acceptance. The patterns now stable enough to trust, the numbers no longer carrying the weight of finality, but of continuation. Rex lies beside the bed, his body fully at rest now, his breathing deep and even. The exhaustion that had been held at bay finally allowed to settle into him, and yet his awareness remains, his ears shifting slightly at the smallest changes, his presence still anchored in the space beside Ethan. The light in the room softens as the morning grows stronger beyond the windows, casting a gentle glow across the surfaces, warming the edges of what had once felt cold and distant. And in that light, everything appears different, not transformed, but revealed in a way that feels more human, more real. Ethan's gaze shifts slowly, taking in the shapes around him, the blurred outlines sharpening just enough for recognition to begin. And when his eyes settle on Rex, something changes again, not in movement, but in expression, a quiet recognition that passes between them without words, without need for explanation. Rex lifts his head slightly, meeting that gaze, his eyes steady, calm, and for a moment, the entire room seems to pause around that connection, as if acknowledging its weight, its meaning, the role it has played in everything that has unfolded. The nurse steps back just a fraction, giving space, understanding instinctively that this moment does not belong to procedure or observation. It belongs to something else, something that cannot be measured or recorded. The physician watches as well, his expression thoughtful, no longer defined by certainty or doubt, but by reflection, because what he has witnessed does not fit neatly into the boundaries he once relied on. And though he does not speak it aloud, the shift is clear, the recognition. That knowledge alone did not bring them here. Ethan's hand moves again, more deliberate now, and though the motion is small, it carries intention, and slowly, almost cautiously, his fingers reach toward the edge of the bed where Rex rests, not fully extending, not yet strong enough, but enough to bridge the space that had once been immeasurable. Rex responds without hesitation, lifting his head just enough to meet that movement, his nose brushing gently against Ethan's fingers, the contact, light, careful, and in that simple gesture, something completes itself, something that had begun long before this room, long before this moment. The nurse exhales softly, her expression warm, not overtly emotional, but softened by what she sees, and she turns her attention back to her work, allowing the moment to continue without interruption. The physician nods once, a quiet acknowledgement not just of recovery, but of the path that led to it, and he steps back further, giving space, understanding now that not every part of healing happens under observation. Rex lowers his head again, resting it lightly against the bed, his eyes still on Ethan, but softer now, no longer searching, no longer holding anything in place, simply present, and for the first time since the night began, there is no tension left in him at all. The room settles fully into this new state, not defined by what almost happened, but by what did, the quiet continuation of life where there had once been only stillness. And as the morning light continues to fill the space, one truth lingers gently in the air, not spoken, not written, but deeply understood, that sometimes the smallest signal, the quietest insistence, can change the course of everything, if only someone is willing to listen long enough to hear it. Days do not pass in a rush after something like this. They unfold slowly, as if the world itself is careful not to disturb what has been returned. And inside the hospital room where Ethan Cole now rests, the light feels softer, warmer, no longer filtered through urgency, but through quiet continuation. The machines are still there, still humming gently, but they no longer define the space, they support it. Their presence secondary to the steady rhythm of Ethan's own breathing, which now carries itself without hesitation, without the fragile uncertainty that once held it in place. He sits slightly propped up, strength not fully restored but returning in quiet increments, each movement measured, each breath grounded, and though the room remains calm, there is a subtle shift in everything around him, a sense that what happened here has left something behind that cannot be undone. Rex lies at the foot of the bed, his body relaxed in a way that speaks of complete release, not just physical, but something deeper, as if the weight he carried has finally settled into rest, and though his eyes are half closed, they open whenever Ethan moves, not out of concern, but out of habit, the quiet instinct of one who has chosen to stay. The nurse enters quietly, her presence familiar now, no longer part of a critical moment, but of a routine that feels almost gentle, and she checks the monitors with a brief glance, adjusting nothing, because there is nothing that needs adjusting, and she offers a small nod, more to the room than to anyone in it, acknowledging what is held steady. Ethan's gaze follows her movement for a moment, then shifts back to Rex, and there is something in that look that has deepened since the first time his eyes opened, not just recognition, but understanding, the quiet awareness of what has been done for him, even if the details remain just beyond reach. He lowers his hand slowly, carefully, toward the edge of the bed, and this time the movement is stronger, more certain, and Rex responds without delay, lifting his head and moving just enough to meet him, his nose brushing gently against Ethan's fingers, the contact simple, steady, and in that touch, something settles fully into place. No words are spoken, none are needed, because the moment carries everything it needs within it, the memory of what almost ended, the presence of what returned, and the quiet bond that bridged the space between them. Outside the window, the day moves forward, light shifting across the sky, the distant sounds of the town continuing as they always do, unaware of the exact point where everything changed. But inside this room, that point remains, held in the stillness, in the breath, in the quiet understanding shared between those who were there. The physician steps in briefly, his movements calm, his expression composed, but there is something in his eyes that reflects the same shift that has touched everyone else, a quiet reconsideration of what he once believed to be fixed, and he looks at Ethan, then at Rex. And though he says very little, the acknowledgement is clear, not spoken, but present. "You are recovering well," he says simply, and Ethan nods faintly, the motion small but intentional, and the physician allows himself a brief pause before turning to leave, as if giving the moment space to remain undisturbed. Rex lowers himself again, resting his head gently against the bed, his breathing slow, even, his body fully at ease, and as Ethan watches him, there is no urgency, no fear, only a quiet certainty that what needed to happen has already happened. The room holds that certainty without effort, the air steady, the lights soft, and as the minutes pass, the silence becomes something else entirely, not empty, not waiting, but complete. Ethan closes his